want to take a second and just make a quick note on when you're multiplying several integers at once. If you think back to your rules, the rules are if they're the same sign, my answer is going to be a positive. If they're different signs, my answer is going to be a negative. And what happens is, kids will look at a problem like this where there's multiple integers at once and say, I'm going to multiply them, and then they apply the rule right away, and they look and say, are all of these the same sign? No, they're not. They're different signs. Okay, so that means my answer must automatically be negative. But that's not how the rule should be applied or when it should be applied. The rule can only be applied when you're doing your multiplying. And when we multiply, you can only ever multiply two numbers at once. So we're going to have to kind of take our order of operations and say, okay, I have a bunch of multiply, but really I can only ever multiply two numbers at once. So let's just focus on these two numbers, -4 times -2, and not worry about the rest of the problem. -4 times -2, same sign, so that gives me a positive answer. Now I still have the rest of it. I still have a +3, I still have a -2. Okay? The -4 and -2 have now merged into the number 8, they're done. So now I can look at the next two. 8 times 3 is 24. They're done. And by the way, they're positive, so I get a positive answer. I still have times -2. Now my last two numbers are different signs. One's positive, one's negative. This is 48. -48. Let's look at one more example with this. -2 times -1 times -3 times -1 times -2. Again, you can't apply the rules now, because you would look and say, oh, they're all the same sign, so my answer should be positive, but that's not when I should be applying the rule. So let's go two numbers at a time, because that's all you can ever do. -2 times -1, +2, they're done, times -3 times -1 times -2. Next two numbers, 2 times -3, they're different signs, so that's -6. They're done, times -1 times -2. -6 times -1. They're same sign, so that's positive, +6. They're done, times -2. Different signs give me a negative answer. 6 times -2 is -12. Now there is a faster way to figure out if your answer is positive or negative. And I'll show you real quick. I'll go back to the beginning of this. This was -2 times -1. Think about the rule. If a negative and a negative make a positive, what would 3 negatives make? Well, the first two negatives would make a positive, so then you would have a positive times a negative, which would be a negative. Let's go back up. Two negatives made a positive. 3 negatives made a negative. What would 4 make? Well, these two negatives would make a positive. These two negatives would make a positive. So I have 2 negatives that make a positive, 2 negatives that make a positive. Positive and a positive is positive. What if I had 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These two would make a positive. These two would make a positive. Positive times a negative is a negative. Do you pick up on the pattern yet? Positives are always how many? Positives are always an even amount of opposite signs or negative signs. Negative answer will always come from an odd amount. So that's a faster way to think about it. Okay? So hold off on your rules until you're only doing two numbers multiplied at a time.